I mean, you know, something got to change. And so I believe that the system that eventually may work better, that hopefully will avoid the downside of the Western system, such as the dysfunctional government that you're seeing in this country, or the budget deficit. By the way, I took a look at some numbers. The 13 countries in the world, major countries in the world, that have a deficit of 80% public debt to GDP. All 13 of them but one, Singapore, is democratic. And so your system systemically produces budget deficits. And you're borrowing from the next generation in order to feed your growth and my growth today. So your system has a problem. Our system has a bigger problem. Let's sit down together. Perhaps we can find a way to find something that will work, especially for a country like China. But hopefully it will shed light on what the West ought to go toward as well. And for that, I think that the basic fundamental need is mutual respect. You don't learn anything from anyone if you don't respect that person. If you are like the Qing emperor 200 years ago that tells the British emissary, we have nothing to learn from you, then you're too proud. You are pride and prejudice are bad combinations. Let's hope that the West today will not follow in the footsteps of the Qing dynasty emperor. After all, it ended 101 days ago. And hopefully with that, we can chart a course for mankind to go forward in the 21st century. Am I hopeful? I don't know. I really don't know. I have my serious doubt, but I am not negative. We all have to do our part. We have to try. Hopefully, we can together build a better world. Thank you.
Provocative speech and indeed thought-provoking and
for which I do not apologize.
So actually we're running out of time, but I really would like to engage the audience in some kind of form of conversation, discussion with Mr. Chan. So we will take maybe a few questions, but before we start with the questions, I'd like to ask you to limit your question to 20 seconds, please. And I would like to also give students a chance to ask questions. So please raise your hand, please.
My name is David, and I'm an engineer as well as a community organizer in San Francisco. Okay. So I heard Mr. Chan saying that China needs some institutional building, right? So I would say you're a very influential person. You know a lot of people. I like to take things on my own hand, okay? Have you ever tried to take things in your own hand as far as China?
Well, obviously, this gentleman have a much higher esteem of this little man than he himself on himself. China is a big country, and I am very interested in policy, but I have no interest in politics. But like it or not, politics is a human thing. It's a societal thing, and you got to be in it, be it the Western mode or the Asian ilk. And I just personally have no interest whatsoever to get into it. Perhaps I'm a little bit too, quote-unquote, honorable to get my hands dirty. But from a policy perspective, I think I'm very interested, and I do have a regular dialogue with friends in Beijing regarding, what I believe to be sound ideas.
Yes, question here.
This summer I read Henry Kissinger's book on China. Do you have any ideas, opinions of his 50 years, or 50 visits to China? Do you have any comments about it?
Well, first of all, declare interest. I'm a longtime friend of Henry, and indeed I hosted a dinner on behalf of the Asia Society in Washington, D.C. for him about 2 months ago, celebrating his book. I believe that Dr. Kissinger is probably one of 3 people in the world that really have the best grasp of geopolitics. Every time I talk to these three gentlemen, I learn so much. And it's not just facts that they produce, but also the way they look at the world. So I have tremendous respect for him. I read a summary of that book. I didn't read the book myself. And I'm totally in agreement with the tenet of that book. I think that one of the things that one of you told me at the reception, and that is the humility. Oh, no, Ray. Where are you? From Dutch and Cox. Yeah, right. You told me that you read that book. And he was telling me that, Mr. Mertens was telling me that the humility that is displayed in Henry in his search to understand China is very admirable. It's not just his understanding of it, but the humility with which he brings in order. And I like to believe that it is partly that humility, of course, of superior intellect as well, and many other things, that really gives him that ability to understand the China better. And I think that that book is a great contribution. I encourage all of you to learn from that gentleman.
Gentleman in the back, in the corner, yes.
谢谢。Well, first of all, the problem with the Chinese system is that it's so leadership dependent. And leadership is usually one or two people. And that is really at the root of China's problem. That if you have a good leader, like Deng Xiaoping, bingo, the country for the last 30 years have gone through heights. But you also can have bad ones. And when you have a bad ones, there's nothing you can do, right? Don't forget, in the 50s, there's a lot of horrific things that went on, all the political movements that, that led to mis-economic steps that killed 20 million people. Then you have the Cultural Revolution, right? So the problem of the Chinese system is that it is very inconsistent, and it really are too dependent on a single leader. And that's why I believe that the Chinese need a institutionalization process in order for it to hopefully, while not going as far as the West, but at least to protect and indeed to hopefully to bring it forward in its continued development. So the last 30 years, obviously, in particular the last 15 in mainland China, is very spectacular, no question about it. But having said that, it is not too surprising. What's so surprising about it? Japan rose from the ashes in a matter of 20 years, from 1945 to 1964 when the Olympics was held there. China, I went there the first time in 1961 as a junior high student. I was so impressed. So you can really accomplish a lot. The four tigers of Asia, it rose in a matter of 20 years, 30 years. And so China, with a good leadership over the last 30 years, started with Deng Xiaoping and then later with others such as Zhu Rongji, it certainly has produced miracles. But whether it is sustainable or not is the big question. If I believe that it is sustainable, I would not be looking for an institutional way out. It is for that precise reason that I think the Chinese system has inherent instability in it, that it may not be sustainable, that we need to learn from a page of the Western civilization and build some institutions. So I think while we are enamored, while we are praising the Chinese for all its accomplishment, let's also not be overly excited about it, because China may yet run into difficulties.